Good evening and happy Wednesday. It is time for Wednesday Wisdom. Um, I'm just going to get started. Hopefully, as people join, just say hi. Um, and if you're not joining live, but you're watching on the playback, let me know as well. Um, I'll be happy to still answer any questions even when I'm no longer live. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Miriam Lacroix. I am an attorney and founder at Lacroix Law PC, and we give immigrants peace of mind while helping them navigate their path to legal status. And so every Wednesday, I try to come on and have a Wednesday wisdom to give immigrants and their families some tips about the immigration process. And today, as you can probably see in the title, I'm not sure if the title shows, but we're going to talk about getting married while you're in removal proceedings, because I'm always talking about marriage-based green cards here, right? And we never really talk about the complications um, that arise. I mean, we talk about situations where, the spouses separate. So I guess we do talk about some complications. But we always talk about cases, marriage-based cases at least, that are pretty straightforward. And sometimes it is not so straightforward, right? Sometimes one spouse has a criminal history, or maybe the spouse doesn't make enough money, or like today, the immigrant spouse is in removal proceedings. And so, what do you do in those situations? And can you still get your green card? And the answer is yes. You can get your green card if you are in removal proceedings. You can get your green card through marriage. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. And I kind of want to do a series. So we'll talk about other complications that come up when you are going through the marriage-based green card process. And today we're going to be talking about the complication of being in removal. Now, removal is just the more current word for deportation, right? Deportation was just a term that was used in the past, and now the immigration courts use removal, but it means the same thing. If you are in removal, you are in deportation, which means you are in court and you are defending yourself against being removed from the United States, and that's really important. So there are two situations in which someone could be in deportation or removal proceedings. One is if they enter the United States unlawfully. So they enter, through the border without inspection, without a visa, without any documents showing that they should be allowed to go through the border. A lot of times, you're placed in removal or deportation if you enter through the border, especially now, because most people who enter through the border are apprehended by Customs and Border Patrol. It used to be that years and years ago, people would enter through the border and they would not be apprehended. And so they never ended up being in removal or deportation proceedings because they were never apprehended or caught by Customs and Border Patrol. So that's one way, right? You're in removal or deportation because you entered the country through the border without inspection and without documents that say that that you can come and visit, or a special visa that says you can come into the United States, right? The other way that you can be placed in removal is if you're already in the United States, right? And so that's for people who are undocumented, right? Maybe they apply for something and it gets denied, and then they're placed into deportation proceedings, or they've already been a green card holder, right? They're already a lawful permanent resident, and something happens, and they're at risk of losing that green card, right? Maybe they committed a crime, right? And so that's another way that you end up in deportation. So it's either you enter the country through the border unlawfully without a visa, or you're already here and you somehow end up in removal proceedings. And a lot of times I get people who come to me when they're in that stage, right? They're at that stage in their immigration journey, and they are in removal or deportation. And they're trying to figure out what their options are because they are they're married to a US citizen, maybe even a lawful permanent resident, right? They're married and they want to get their green card through that spouse. So today I'm going to be talking about those who entered the country lawfully, because there's a whole other process for people who entered the country unlawfully, right? And so we can talk about that next week. But if you are in removal or deportation and you've entered the country lawfully via a visa, right? You came as a visitor and maybe somehow you got scooped up into a removal or deportation proceedings, or you had your green card at one point, and you are in removal proceedings. So we're going to be talking about those situations today. And so normally clients who come to me, they're in deportation proceedings. Like I said, they're married to a US citizen, and they want to know if they can move forward with their marriage-based green card case, and they can. The only wrinkle is that you are held to a higher standard than those who are not in deportation or removal proceedings, right? Your evidence has to be crisp. You have to have some really good evidence to pass the standard that USCIS is going to place against you. Okay. I want that to be clear to you. You are not meeting the same standard as someone who is not in removal and is applying for their green card, right? And so you want to make sure that you have enough evidence proving that your relationship is real, your relationship is legitimate, okay? So let me, okay. So in a situation where the immigrant spouse is not in removal, they will be able to submit, proof. Of course, they still have to submit proof of their relationship. But oftentimes when they go for their interview, the officer can give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Maybe they don't have enough evidence. Maybe their evidence isn't that strong, but based on the interview, how they interact, based on letters from families and friends, the officer believes that their marriage is legitimate and can approve. That's not the case if you are in removal or deportation proceedings, right? You are going to have to prove that you're going to have physical evidence that you and your spouse your marriage is bona fide, right? And so what you're actually seeking when you are going through the marriage-based green card process, when you're in deportation proceedings, is something called a bona fide marriage exemption, right? And so with the bona fide marriage exception, you're saying, yes, I know because I'm in deportation, I'm not supposed to be able to do this, but my marriage is bona fide, so I'm asking for an exception. And I'm asking for an exception here. And so how you do that is you ask when you file for your petition, right? And you're not going to be able to file your petition and your green card together like you would normally do if you weren't in removal or deportation proceedings. You'd have to file your petition first, right? And get that approved. And then it's likely that the judge will take a look at your green card application, right? So you won't be sending your green card application to USCIS. More than likely, you will be adjudicating it with the judge, and the judge will decide on whether or not your green card application should be approved. Okay. And so with the exemption, you want to prove that you and your spouse live together, right? You want to have more proof than you think you need, right? So bills showing that, you both have bills coming to the same address. Maybe both of you are on utility bills. Maybe both of you are on a car note or car insurance. Maybe one of you is on the other's health insurance, right? You have children together. If that's the case, then that's really helpful. Letters from family and friends, not just saying, oh, this is a lovely couple and I really like them, but saying, who did I know first? How did I meet them? How long have I known them? How did I learn about their relationship? Do I know that they live together, right? Did I go to their wedding? Did I go to any events with them? Um, or to any events that they've held. What do I think about their relationship? How do they interact with each other? Right? These you want the letters to be much. You don't want the letters to be shallow. Because I've seen in a lot of circumstances the letters just say, "Yes, I know Mr. and Mrs. So and so. They're a wonderful couple. I hope that Mr. or Mrs. So and so can get their green card to stay in the United States. If you have any questions, call me." Not good enough, right? You want to know that, like I said, they want to know all of what the person who's writing the letter knows about you and your relationship. And so keep that in mind. It is very important to make sure that you meet that bona fide marriage exception. Okay. That is really all I wanted to talk about today on this live, because I found that I get a lot of questions from people who are in deportation proceedings or who were in deportation proceedings and maybe at one point they got ordered removed. And that's also an issue that they will have to deal with. And so, I wanted to answer that question for people. Yes, you can obtain your green card, even if you are in removal or deportation proceedings. But I guess really quickly, I can talk about what happens if you were in deportation proceedings and maybe you never showed up to your hearing or you never knew about your hearing, but for some reason you weren't there and you were ordered deported in your absence, right? And so in those situations, it's really not clear cut and straightforward, right? In those situations, you have to reopen your case, right? And it takes a lot to get your case reopened because you have to prove, why you missed your hearing, right? Is it because an attorney didn't tell you, right? Your counsel was not assisting you properly? Is it because you were a minor and your parents didn't tell you? Is it because you never got notice of the hearing, right? You never got a hearing notice. You stayed at the same address for many years, never saw notice. So you'd have to prove that there was a particular reason why you missed that court date, in order to get the case reopened, because you're not going to be able to adjust your status or get your green card through USCIS if you have a case. If your case was last at the immigration court, you have to go through the immigration court. And if you are in the immigration court and your case was closed because you were ordered deported, you have to get it back open so that the judge can look at your green card application. That is what's absolutely necessary. So there's a lot to think about, of course, when you are in deportation proceedings and you marry a US citizen, right? You want to think about, how did you enter the country? Did you enter through the border? Did you enter somehow uninspected? Because if that's the case, and you are now in removal proceedings, you will also need a waiver, right? If you didn't enter the country through the border or uninspected, and you got into deportation proceedings because of an application you applied for, or maybe you committed a crime, or whatever the case may be, you may not need a waiver, right? You may or may not need a waiver, depending on maybe if there was a crime or something. But you do have a higher burden to meet, right? I mean, across the board, you have a higher burden to meet. But if you are able to get your green card here without leaving the country and having to get a waiver, you have a much higher burden to meet in that situation. And so you have to have physical proof at your interview about your marriage, that your marriage is legitimate, right? It's not good enough that you and your spouse present well and do a great interview. They want to see the proof because your standard is higher than anyone else, who is not in removal proceedings. And the other thing you want to think about is, whether or not you have been ordered removed in the past, right? Because if you have been ordered removed in the past, you may have to get your case reopened in immigration court in order for the judge to hear your green card application, okay? But the gist of it is, it has been possible in each one of those scenarios for someone to obtain their green card through marriage, even though they were in removal or deportation proceedings. And so if anyone has any questions about this topic, you can leave a comment here, or you can send me a message and maybe I'll answer it on next week's Wednesday Wisdom. But I'm going to continue on with a series about complications that happen within a marriage-based green card case. And so this is one complication, right? Getting married while you're in removal proceedings, right? That is not clear cut. That is not straightforward. It can really affect your case. So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to end today's live. And if you're looking to schedule a consultation, definitely give us a call. I have my number scrolling at the bottom of the screen here. So you can call that number. You can schedule a consultation and speak with me about your case if you're in removal proceedings, or even if you're not in removal proceedings, but you're going through a marriage-based green card case. Okay. Have a good evening. And anyone who's watching this on the playback, just let me know that you're watching this later on. Have a good night.